So, good morning. Thank you, Vince and Jonathan, for your music this morning. And welcome to a very unusual day in the life of the Christian people. As on Friday, we don't have the sacraments on Holy Saturday. It's a day of suspension, a day of waiting, a day of silence, a day of attention. The word attention in English is related, I believe, to the Latin tendere, which means to stretch, and it gives us the word tendon, which allows us to stretch our bodies, our joints. And so to pay attention is to stretch our powers of consciousness, and to stretch beyond our comfort zone of self-regard and self-centeredness, to stretch out, to see beyond ourselves, to go beyond ourselves. That's what growth is, that's what the journey is. So to pay attention is not a passive act. It's not just meditation, it's not just about relaxation. It's about an actual expansion and stretching of ourselves. And it's related, I think anyway, to the French word to wait. Attendre, to wait. And there's this paradox in Holy Saturday especially, where we're paying attention, we are staying awake as Jesus asked us to do, we are on a journey in that sense, but we are waiting. The primary experience we have in this stage of our pilgrimage is of waiting, and we're not quite sure what we are waiting for. That's why we wait in faith. But we're waiting and we're staying awake, we're keeping vigil. And then this evening, when we move into the Easter Vigil and into the great symbols of Easter, the fire and the light and the water, the new life, and the return of all the colour of life through the liturgy, we begin to see what it is we are stretching, waiting for. One of my favourite texts, I think in all of the Christian literature, is the text in the Office of Readings and the Breviary for Holy Saturday, which is from an ancient homily for Holy Saturday. We don't know who wrote it, but it's a very simple and pure and heartfelt expression of faith, and particularly faith as it is felt in this stage of our Easter journey, of our Triduum. This is how it begins, or this part of it begins. Something strange is happening. There is a great silence on earth today, a great silence and stillness. The whole earth keeps silence because the King is asleep. The earth trembled and is still because God has fallen asleep in the flesh, and He has raised up all who have ever slept since the world began. God has died in the flesh, and hell trembles with fear. Something strange is happening, and that strangeness is related to silence and stillness. When we begin to meditate, the silence and the stillness of meditation seem very strange to us. Attractive, perhaps, and we want to taste it more. We feel that it will be beneficial to us, but strange nonetheless, because we're no longer able to use our usual ways of explanation and description given to us by our mind, by our ideas, by our past experience. We're moving into something new, and that might be both attractive and also rather frightening for us, because to move into a new level of being, a new kind of being, is disturbing. We have to be prepared to be changed. And the text uses this image of sleep. The king sleeps. The whole earth keeps silence because the king is asleep. And meditation itself is often, in the later mystical literature, described as a kind of wakeful sleep. It's a sleep because it is a state of being, a state of mind, in which we are moving into something beyond our normal consciousness. In sleep we are unconscious. It's a transitional state as well. When we go to sleep at night, we expect to wake up in the morning. But we have to let go in order to enter into that transition. We have to let go. We have to. Often people suffer from insomnia or bad sleep, perhaps because our minds are filled with anxieties or compulsions that we can't let go of, and which control us. And we have to let go of them naturally, hopefully, in order to drop off to sleep. And what happens in that transitional state is something out of our control, entirely natural and universal, but is wonderfully renewing and refreshing. After a good night's sleep, you can look at the problems of the day before with much more equanimity, a much clearer mind, and we often say, just sleep on it and it will look different in the morning. So it's a good image, this idea, this image of sleep, and we use it. Go into any graveyard and that image is used to describe death itself. To the eyes of faith, and faith is the vision of things unseen. Faith is our commitment to a reality greater than we can measure, but which we can experience. So to the eyes of faith, to that kind of intelligence, sleep and death are transitional and restorative states. So what is happening in this sleep? When we sleep, perchance to dream, we often dream. And we often like to remember those dreams because they seem to have significance. We like to analyze them, ponder them. They seem to be bringing us a message or telling us some truth, opening us to some level of wisdom that we can't find at the ordinary conscious level of our minds. And so we often value those that life that is out of our normal rational range of understanding or access. So again here in this text, the silence of the earth reflects the sleeping king, but he is on a journey, just as we often might feel we go on a journey when we sleep. We go into this dream world. So Jesus has gone on a journey as his body lies in the tomb. but he, the full person, has gone on a journey where? Well, this is what he says. He has gone to search for our first parent as for a lost sheep. Greatly desiring to visit those who live in darkness and in the shadow of death, he is gone to free from sorrow the captives Adam and Eve. He who is both God and Son of Eve. This is Jesus. The Lord approached them bearing the cross, the weapon that had won him the victory. So the cross has now become not the instrument of his being a victim or instrument of his torture, but it has become his weapon. He's done a reversal of energy, a reversal of roles. Now the cross has become the key and the weapon that gives him access to this deeper world of human, the human realm. He's still in the human realm, but at a much deeper and atavistic, primal level than we could ever imagine. So the Lord approached them, our first parents, with this weapon of the cross. At the sight of him, Adam, the first man he had created, struck his breast in terror and cried out to everyone. So there's a lot of people huddled down there in the netherworld. Struck his breast in terror and cried out to everyone, "My Lord be with you all." Christ answered him, "And with your spirit." So a strange twist in the dream of this descent into hell. This is what is called in the Creed. He died and descended into hell. Hell is the netherworld. And the other world, a primal world, but also a world in which our deepest fears and our darkest images are stored. This is not the next world where we are freed, but this is the world where we are still controlled by the fears or the memories of our own personal lives, or indeed of our human ancestors as well. And we don't have to look very far to see how much we as individuals in our particular cultures are controlled by the memories, the cultural, racial, religious, ethnic memories of our tribe or of our group. So what we are being asked to consider here is that there are even deeper levels than the cultural and the historical, deeper levels that take us back to the very dawn of human consciousness and to those very early moments of the human mind awakening to itself and to its destiny. And here in this barely conscious realm, a level of which is present in all of us, here Christ has entered. And he has engaged in a dialogue with the forces at this deepest level, symbolized here by Adam. And Adam, the first man, strikes his breast in terror and reflecting the fear that Jesus' disciples after the resurrection will all feel as well. When they see him, the first thing he has to say to them, or the angels have to say to them, is, "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid." It's the most frequently repeated verse in the Bible, but many of its occurrences occur at this stage of the story of Jesus. Because what has happened is that he has sunk the light of consciousness down deep into those dark places, that netherworld, where our most unconscious fears and bondage, we are held in bondage by our fears, exist. And so the first reaction we have as these deeper fears of our human ancestry are touched by his light and presence, our first reaction is fear. Because these fears have been wakened up. These are sleeping dogs. We've woken up the sleeping dogs. Normally we like the sleeping dogs to sleep, and we're content to live with this dark energy of our psyches untouched, and we become sometimes very nervous when these levels of our being are touched. We can become very aggressive in defense of our isolation, or of our autonomy, or of our privacy, because as we experience another something other entering into this realm, these monsters begin to stir, and our first reaction can be simply one of a kind of primal terror and being invaded. So poor old Adam is struck with terror, strikes his breast with terror, but then he cries out, surprisingly, in this liturgical refrain, "My Lord be with you all." The Lord be with you. How one of the refrains of the liturgy that we will say several times at the vigil tonight. And it is Christ who answers him, "And with you, and with your spirit." So the strange thing is, it seems as if Adam is the celebrant here, because it's the celebrant who says, "The Lord be with you," and the people who reply, "And with you, and with your spirit." But it's something slightly odd and dreamlike is happening, because it's Adam who is empowered with this declaration that the Lord is with us now. So it's as if he knows that it is the Lord who is there. The fear is not of the Lord. The fear is the very thing that the Lord has come to stir up, release, and dissipate and dissolve. And the people, Christ answers, "And with you." But then Jesus, who is the protagonist in this, it is Jesus who takes him by the hand, this gentle and kind and caring gesture. He takes someone by the hand if they are frightened, or if they are very young, or if they're very old, or if they're very sick. We take them by the hand to help them. So Jesus takes him by the hand, and this is illustrated in many icons of this theme in the Orthodox Church, where Jesus descends into hell, and sometimes you see Christ sort of stretching out towards Adam and sort of pulling him out of the pit that he's fallen into. So he raises him up and says, "Awake, O sleeper." So he has been the one who's asleep. So he's in this realm of diminished consciousness. When we're asleep, we're not dead, but we're not very active either. We're not fully conscious of what is happening to us or the meaning of it. We can even be in some states of sleep where we seem to be fully awake, like as when you're sleepwalking. And to everybody else, you look as if you're fully compos mentis and quite normal. But in fact, you are in a deep level of REM sleep, or whatever type of sleep it is. And it's a dangerous state to be in. Apparently you have to wake people up out of that quite carefully. So, it suggests to us that we might spend a great deal of our life in this sleepwalking state, where it seems to us and to others as if we are awake. We know what we're doing, we know what to worry about, we know what time the ferry goes, we know what time we should eat, we know how we should plan our lives for the next few days or few years, but we're actually sleepwalking, because the full consciousness of the wakeful state has not been released. The light of consciousness that Christ brings has not really woken us up. So we are still among the dead, in the sense that to be asleep is to be half dead. It's also, I think, a very moving passage, because it's Christ, son of Adam, son of man, son of Mary, who is going down into this dark pit of human memory, ancestral existence, to find our lost parents. And there's a psychological aspect to this, I think, too, which we could sense to be part of our experience of our spiritual journey, our spiritual practice, our meditation. Probably the first period of time in our journey of meditation, could be a few years, there is depending on where you're coming from and what your history is, there could be a lot of psychological work to be done. And so very often you find yourself thinking about memories or relationships. Very often you might begin with your parents or your family life, and you find that you are working on those memories and thinking about those relationships as you hadn't done before or for a long time. It doesn't mean to say you have to go and get psychotherapy. It means that the psychotherapy is being done in you through the process of the meditation itself. Therapy means healing. Meditation is a healing, like all prayer is about healing, because it's about the journey to wholeness, to holiness, this religious experience we've been talking about this week. So there may be individuals who do need some psychological intervention, professional intervention, to help them to get through some of these blocks. But generally speaking, the therapy is perfectly natural. It doesn't need to be professionalized, it's just personal and natural. So it may well be that we have to go in search of our parents during this early part of our journey of meditation. As adult children. So we have to learn to relate to those formative experiences of our personal history from a new place, from a place of maturity. We find ourselves then, in a sense, in relationship with ourselves, having to relate to ourselves as a child, with all the reactions that we had as a child, those powerful formative reactions we had to our parents, the way we were treated as children, or not treated by our parents, or so on, the failures of our parents, very conscious to us, maybe leaving hurts or absences within us that we have learned to carry with us. But often still, therefore, having great parts of our identity still locked into the past as a child. And as an adult, we find ourselves having to deal with these childish reactions. You know, this isn't something to blame yourself for. This is simply the result of how the psyche operates. So if something was done to you as a child, or you were deprived of something as a child, that leaves a child's reaction, a child's response in you. That response may be very active in you as an adult person, much more grown up and sensible and together kind of person, but you still feel yourself reacting to the feeling of rejection, or the feeling of neglect, or the feeling of oppression or violence, or the feeling of unworthiness. You still react as an adult in a childish way to what you perceive to be those experiences in your life now. So, in meditation, we move. We don't go as deep as Jesus did into the ancestral memory, but we go into our personal memory, and we awaken as an adult to these levels of our self, of our personal history, which need to be healed, we could say, but also woken up, also matured. And we become then more and more adult children. We'll find, for example, that our relationship to our parents, the way we think about them and feel about them, even if they're long gone, doesn't matter in a sense whether they are there or not, right? But our relationship to them changes. And our understanding of our own past also changes. In a sense, what begins to happen, and this happens if your parents live a long time and you see them become weak and unable to look after themselves, and maybe struggling with their own mistakes that they committed, you find as an adult child that you have to be their parent, that you have to care for them, both taking them by the hand and helping them to face what they have to face, to find the forgiveness that they need to find, and to prepare themselves for their own next step in their journey. So you become, in a sense, a parent to them, but that also means, in a sense, you become a parent to yourself. And this enables us to become kinder and more mature to our mother and father, relatives and siblings and so on. So to that very formative and important part of ourselves. And in that sense we begin to integrate them as well as to separate from them. Unless you separate, Jesus said, from your mother and father and brothers and sisters, you cannot be a grown-up person. You cannot follow him, because only an adult can follow him. So, I think you could say at one level this text is describing what we experience psychologically and individually, and he's describing it happening collectively. And Jesus has sunk down into the collective identity of the human realm. We're all human beings. We all recognize each other as human beings. We can relate to each other psychologically, emotionally, intellectually, culturally, religiously, in all these sort of ways as human beings, which we can't do to non-human creatures. But at the same time, we're all intensely individual. So we have both a common nature and we have a eternally unique identity. That's our paradox. So there are certain times and experiences in which we can experience our collective, our common ground, our common nature. If we never experience that, we are locked into a terrible hell, the hell of individualism, of competitiveness, of self-defense, of hiding behind our passwords, and living in a world that is bounded only by our individuality. So we are both these things. We have both of these aspects to us. So I think what we see here is Jesus descending into that common ground at the deepest level so that we can be fully ourselves. And free from bondage. This is what he's doing. He's freeing us collectively from the bondage of the past. If we're frightened of the future, it's only because something has happened to us in the past that makes us frightened of the future. So it's always in the past that the problem lies. It doesn't lie in the future. The future hasn't happened yet. But the future is conditioned by the past. So we have to go back to sink down into those past realms, past experience, and release the energy that has been blocked there. And that's what redemption is. That's why Jesus descends into hell. And that's why the cross is not sufficient in itself. A lot of people, as I've said, most people like to come to church on Good Friday because they can resonate so well with the cross. It speaks to their own experience of suffering, and it gives meaning, it gives a certain sublimity to their own personal suffering or problems, and that's as it should be, it does. But to stop there is a very ordinary, very common occurrence, but it's only the beginning. It's only the opening of the door. We then have to go through the door that the cross opens for us. So Jesus goes down into this sort of cave. It's like Plato's cave. Remember in the story of Plato's cave, the human race, people are held in a dark cave, barely lit by a fire. The fire is behind them. They are trapped in their seats with their back to the fire. So all they can see in front of them are their own shadows reflected from the light behind them. They see the flickering shadows and they think that's it. That's what the world is. That's what life is about. And then one of them escapes, makes a long and difficult journey up out of the cave, and gets out into the real world, into the light, and realizes actually this is the real world, and actually then even looks at the sun, which is the source of light, and sees the light, and then comes back, redescends into the cave, comes back to the people and says, hey guys, you don't need to be locked up down here. I can untie you, and there's a beautiful world up there that we can walk up to. It's a little bit of a walk, but we can get there. And they don't like it. They don't want to be disturbed. They don't believe him. They don't want to take the risk. And the parallel with this is very clear, I think. So Jesus has ascended, in a sense. He's gone out of the cave, but then he's come back into the cave to wake people up. I am your God, who for your sake have become your son. For your sake I have become your son. You see the exchange of roles between parent and child again. What could be more disturbing and more liberating for us than to be not just the child of your parent, child of your parent, but also to be the parent of your parent. It's like, I think, after I remember first time I taught in a school, I did some supply teaching during one of my university vacations. I think it was the first time I remember, going into a classroom on my own with a group of feral students. And it totally changes your sense of self. There's a teacher there smiling, knows what I'm talking about. It totally changes you because you are now on the other side. Your relationship is, you're in the same relationship, but you are exchanging roles. It's tremendously liberating to do that, but very challenging, disturbing, especially when they do get out of control. So out of love for you and for your descendants, I now, by my own authority, he says, command all who are held in bondage to come forth, all who are in darkness to be enlightened, and all who are sleeping to arise. Well, this is not just a little polite invitation, This is a voice of love. He says, this is all motivated by love, not by the desire to have power, but it is also communicated with overwhelming authority. The authority of love. It's not the same as power over people, but it is a mighty force, this authority of love. And he is commanding us to wake up, to cut our bondage to the past, and to awake, and to be enlightened. I order you, O sleeper, to be awake. So this is why, as the early Christians reflected on this experience, they presented Jesus in many different images, in different forms. The first image of Jesus we have is of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, carrying a young godlike figure in the Greek form, carrying a sheep on his shoulder, from the story of the Good Shepherd. It's a long time before images of Jesus on the cross developed, although that's become the dominant one in the Western Church. But then also there were images of Jesus in majesty or in glory, reflecting his or illustrating his power, his authority, and that can be misinterpreted. It can be hijacked by small-minded politicians, religious or otherwise, the Emperor Constantine or local bishops. It can be hijacked and used as an image of, to support their own worldly ambitions. But in itself, the image is a beautiful image of liberation. We need authority in our lives. Children need authority. They need to be instructed, to be taught, and they need to have the people who do that, of course, need to be healthy, but they also need to have self-confidence because a child or any student will learn better if they feel that the teacher knows what they're talking about and has experienced it. So here we have Jesus as a teacher, as a liberator. I order you, O sleeper, to awake. I did not create you to be held a prisoner in hell. So this is where his authority comes from, that in the deepest part of his own personal nature, he is the Word through whom all things came into existence. So he's speaking to us as one of us, the son of Adam, but in the deepest mystery of his existence as the Word of God. So that's ultimately where his authority comes from. It doesn't come from any human institution. His authority comes from his own nature. Rise from the dead, for I am the life of the dead. Nothing that came into existence, St. John says, existed without him. He is the source of life. Rise up, work of my hands, you who were created in my image. So again, there is an exchange of identities, parent and child, and Jesus, the Word, the force, the template of all creation, telling us, the work of his hands, that we are in his image, that we are like him, we are closer to him than we can imagine, because the image is exact. We recognize ourselves in him, and he sees himself in us. And then the great line of this, great sentence of this text: rise, let us leave this place. So let's get out of this miserable hell of fear and the past and the bondage and our password encrusted, enclosed lives. Let's just get out of this altogether and walk up out into the sunlight. Let us leave this place, for you are in me and I am in you. Together we form only one person, and we cannot be separated. Well, that echoes a deep longing of the human heart that is reflected in every marriage ceremony and reflected in every deep commitment of our lives, to be one with, in a way that cannot be broken. This is what we long for and try to achieve through the major decisions and commitments of our lives. And here we are told that our longing for this is actually a reflection of a state or a level of our existence where it is already happening, it has already been realized. Christ in you. That's the message of the New Testament. Christ is already in us, and in us, in that place where we are one with him, and it is inseparable. And that's the message of hope here. So it's not like a contract that can be broken. We either act on that awareness or we're not. But we can't make it not happen. We can't make it not be. That is the way it is. We cannot be separated from that which called us into existence and which has and loves us, and wants only that we should be fully alive, not to control or possess us or get into our private life or any of the things that the ego bothers about, but just so that we can be fully alive. And that's what love is, isn't it? If you love someone, you only want them to be well. For your sake, I, your God, became your son. So this flipping of roles is also a renunciation of power. The God that Jesus reflects and is the image of is not the God that the ego puts on a pedestal and idolizes, but it is the God who empties himself and and renounces the power over us that he could obviously exercise. So we are in union with a force, with a person, with a power that renounces all power over us. What does that do to us? I, your God, became your son. I, the Lord, took the form of a slave. I, whose home is above the heavens, descended to the earth and beneath the earth. For your sake, for the sake of man, I became like a man without help, free among the dead. And that describes what Jesus is today, free among the dead. For the sake of you, who left a garden, the Garden of Eden, I was betrayed in a garden. Is the imagination of the early Christians weaving together the Old and the New Testaments in order to make a coherent narrative of salvation. And I was crucified in a garden. See on my face the spittle I received in order to restore to you the life I once breathed into you. See there the marks of the blows I received in order to refashion your warped nature in my image. On my back, see the marks of the scourging I endured to remove the burden of sin that weighs upon your back. See my hands nailed firmly to a tree for you who once wickedly stretched out your hand to a tree. So the signs of suffering are still there. As we live our lives, our brief span of life, we accumulate many scars, many marks. We've all got somewhere on our bodies marks of our suffering. I have a little, I think it's almost, no, it's still there. When I was about 6 years old, I cut my thumb here with a broken milk bottle. And that's presumably will be there for as long as this body is here in this form. It doesn't hurt anymore. And the fear and the crying that it induced when it happened is long forgotten. But the sign of it is still there. It's part of my story, impressed on my body. So here we see these signs of Jesus' suffering still present in his relationship to us. I slept on the cross, sleeping again, and a sword pierced my side for you who slept in paradise and brought forth Eve from your side. My side has healed the pain in yours. So this exchange of roles, that is the theme in a way of this text, also allows a healing and a redemptive suffering to happen, for him to take away or to heal our pain. My sleep will rouse you from your sleep in hell. This is very homeopathic. Is that homeopathic? Yes. The sword that pierced me has sheathed the sword that was turned against you. And there's one more paragraph we'll look at this afternoon. But here we see the wounded healer, one of the great archetypes of human imagination and myth, and reminding us, perhaps if you know the story of Chiron. Chiron was one of the centaurs, but he was the best of the centaurs. The centaurs were not very admirable creatures. They were just partied all day and lived a rather dissolute life. But Chiron was an exception to this. He was intelligent, he was compassionate, and he was a teacher, a good teacher. And he was also an expert in medicine, and had many students whom he trained in the healing arts. And then one day he was caught up in a battle. The centaurs were all having a riot after the pubs closed one night, and he was shot with a poisoned arrow. But he was immortal, so he couldn't die. But he was in terrible pain and suffering. But even in this wounded and painful state, he continued to teach and to heal those who came to him. So the wounded healer. And then Prometheus, who stole the fire from the gods and brought this great knowledge to humanity, was being tortured eternally for his crime. And Chiron struck a deal with the authorities to exchange his immortality for the life of Prometheus. So he was able to die and gave his immortality so that Prometheus could be freed from his anguish, his suffering. So it's a very beautiful and deep story of redemptive suffering, and it's evoked here, I think, this story maybe, but it's evoked here in the idea of Jesus as the wounded healer, who is able to take the sting of death out of our human existence by his own death and by the gift of self, that gift of self we've been talking about during these days of Holy Week.